The prequel trilogy and the Clone Wars TV show had some incredible Jedi, but this one in particular could be even cooler in a spin-off series. Welcome to Star Wars Uplink. The prequel series was well known for its introduction to many more Jedi than we thought existed, especially when you look at the original trilogy. It was a whole buffet of Jedi. And that was something that many people loved, me included. I loved the expansive view of the Jedi at that time. It was really interesting to see them at almost the height of their power right before the fall. But one in particular that has always been one of my favorites is Plo Koon. Plo Koon is really interesting. If you take into account the Legends material that we have around Plo Koon, he is even more fascinating because his race and species is very different from many others in the Star Wars galaxy. Plo Koon is a Kaldorian, and the Kaldors were very different from what we know of a lot of species. They used the Force long before they ever joined the Galactic Republic or even the Jedi, and they use the Force similarly to how the Jedi do. And their specific Force tradition was known as the Barando Sages, and they were more as advisors to rich and powerful Kaldor families. Something interesting about them is they utilize the Force to predict weather patterns, and eventually they became even more prolific in the Force, and there were specific ones that basically became crazy wizards is what we know of them as. And then eventually, once they joined the Republic, they came into the Jedi Order and were pretty prolific there as well. Now, when we go to Plo Koon, he's quite interesting. In canon, there is quite a bit of content around him. We see him a lot in the Clone Wars show, and we see his relationship with Ahsoka quite clearly there. He has been through all aspects of her training and was a big part of her becoming a Jedi from an early age. There are a couple things that I want to bring up here. One is D. Bradley Baker said in a recent interview that he would love to see a miniseries come into fruition around the early stages of Ahsoka becoming a Jedi and Plo Koon's training of her. And this isn't the first time that D. Bradley Baker has said, hey, I would love to see something more with Plo Koon. A while ago, he said on a panel or a stage or interview and said that he would love to see Plo Koon survive, and said, quote, if Darth Maul can survive Obi Wan cutting him in half, then Plo Koon could survive Order 66. Now, we do know that Plo Koon pretty clearly died as far as we can tell. His ship blew up in, I think it was Revenge of the Sith. So we kind of have a fine period at the end of that sentence when it comes to Plo Koon. But I personally would love to see a further fleshing out of Plo Koon because his history is so interesting, and I think it would be good to return to that time period. Looking back at Tales of the Jedi, he is a key part of Ahsoka's Jedi training before she is assigned to Anakin Skywalker as a Padawan. And I want to take this as a moment to really theorize around what we could see and what I would like to see with future Tales of the Jedi seasons. I really enjoyed Tales of the Jedi, but I do have some criticisms of it. I think there are some ways that it could be better with the second season. I think the splitting up of two different stories or two different characters to tell stories with was a mistake. I personally would love to see more. I felt like I wanted to see more of Count Dooku, and I felt like I wanted to see more of Ahsoka. And I think that could be shared with a lot of other people too. Count Dooku, I think they did not have enough time to really flesh out his character in a really interesting way, in my personal opinion, with how limited of a runtime that they had with him. What we got was really cool, and I loved love to see it, but it was more of like a tease. It was like getting a nibble of a piece of sushi rather than having the whole roll. And I think that's good in some cases. I think just little teases are fine. But in a case like this, I would rather have the whole season dedicated to one Jedi story rather than jumping in between all these various versions. And that's not even going into the piece with Ahsoka, where they did retcon quite a bit of her story and her first Inquisitor defeat. Also, now that Bad Batch is at its third and final season, I think there's a perfect opportunity for more of the animated stuff. We still don't know if we're going to get another animated piece of content in Star Wars, and I think that would be such a shame to just not have an ongoing series. I think, of course, we're going to get more Tales of the Jedi, as it gives them an opportunity to keep those animation skills sharp and explore some various ideas and thoughts and timelines around the Star Wars universe. Maybe even introducing ideas that we'll see play out in the movies or further in like the live action TV shows. I think there's a lot of potential here when we look at those animated shows. It's not as high impact, but it can tell quite interesting stories, as we're seeing with Bad Batch Season 3. And just the storytelling we're seeing with that season is so cool. But I think they also need to be aware of the impact that they have with the extended universe when we look at the books materials. I know that a lot of people got really frustrated with the change to Ahsoka's story, and I think that shouldn't be overlooked as we go into the future. So as we get more of these pieces of media with the episodes like Tales of the Jedi, I think it would be good to keep in mind what else is out there at the same point. There are a lot of fun stories that are able to be told in Star Wars, and I think this specific formula in this format would be incredible to see. I personally would love to see Plo Koon's story explored in something like this. Whether or not he survives, I personally think he should not come back to life, but again, there are some clear ways that he could come back to life with his species and his abilities through his race. So there's stuff like that they could play around with, but that again takes away from death in Star Wars if no one is actually ever dead, where the stakes and stories rely on those stakes. So there's that side of things. But even if he doesn't survive, I think there are some stories to be told with Plo Koon, whether or not it's him training Ahsoka more, or even before that, I think could be really cool. Exploring into his species and his upbringing, I think would be really cool to see. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Is this something that you would like to see? Are you as fascinated with Plo Koon as a character as I am? Let me know in the comments below. Check out our podcast wherever you find podcasts. And as always, may the Force be with you.